Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, wherever you may be, anywhere across this lovely world of ours. Thank you so much for joining us live here today for Serverless Office Hours. Same place, same time, every single week. And we're streaming on the AWS Twitch channel, Serverless Land, YouTube, and also via LinkedIn Live. My name's Julian Wood. I'm a developer advocate for serverless at AWS, and I'm super duper happy to be talking to Ankur Desai, who is the principal product manager of Amazon CodeWhisperer. Hi there, Ankur. Welcome to Serverless Office Hours.
Hi there.
So you're based in Seattle. How long have you been at AWS, and what's your sort of journey been like that you've landed up doing cool things like CodeWhisperer?
Sure. Yeah, I've been with AWS exactly 1 year today. So
Congratulations. That's like 7 years in normal years, I think.
yeah, that is true. That is true. Yeah, and before AWS, I actually managed product roadmap as a product manager with various startups in the Bay Area. And with AWS, I have been managing the product roadmap and go-to-market for Amazon CodeWhisperer.
Fantastic. Well, we're going to be delving super deep into interesting parts of Amazon CodeWhisperer with Lambda. But yeah, just looking over the past week of AWS Serverless on Serverless Office Hours last week, we had the excellent James Eastham, who was talking all about .NET on AWS Lambda best practices. So the recording is available on YouTube, youtube.com/serverlessland, as long with all the other Serverless Office Hours videos. And we've been adding some chapters and some more information into the YouTube description. So hopefully that'll help you find more information and get more value from the recorded videos after the fact. Over the past week, AWS Lambda has got a new part of it, which is Amazon CloudWatch Evidently. This adds support for client-side evaluations for Lambda powered by AWS App Config. And CloudWatch Evidently is a way that it's a sort of a testing service that you can use. And now that's got a better integration that you can actually do the client-side evaluations using Lambda. And App Config is our super cool configuration management and hosting service, which works extremely well with Lambda. So if that's of interest to you, before we spoke about the SNS, which is exciting, the message data protection that can help you remove and block PII information from being received and from being sent out. So that is also super useful. Some recent compute blog posts. We've got Marcia Bishaba on the second one, lifting and shifting a web app to AWS Serverless. She's really good at explaining how you can take your existing kind of web apps and how you can start to take advantage of all the AWS Serverless offerings to make it more agile, to scale better, and also reduce your costs. And then if you are using Redis and you've got MemoryDB, Mansi and Aditya have a really good post talking all about how you can use it with your Java-based Lambda workloads. So certainly go and have a look at that. AWS Summertime, there are still some more coming up. Singapore is on the 6th of October. So if you are around Singapore, certainly sign up for that. That will be super useful and interesting. Of course, the big show coming up at the end of the year is AWS reInvent live in Las Vegas. I'll be there with a lot of other AWS people. We'd love to see you there. So head to reinvent.awsevents.com and you can sign up. And there are talks and workshops, and the whole team at AWS here is working hard to put on the best possible reInvent for you. And so, yeah, it would be amazing if you could be part of it. If not, there will be lots of recorded sessions. I'm actually doing 2 sessions, so they'll be recorded as well and for available viewing afterwards. But, you know, seeing everyone in person is always super duper great. Talking about Amazon CodeWhisperer and how to generate Lambda code with ML. Ankur, this sounds like a bit of magic. Can you tell us about CodeWhisperer and how on earth this all works?
Absolutely. Thank you, Julian. Super excited to be here and talk about CodeWhisperer, especially in the context of serverless and Lambda. So we'll start with a few challenges developers face on a day-to-day basis, right? The biggest challenge they have is they have to leave their IDE, and they end up spending a lot of time searching for code snippets and documentation on the web. And there could be multiple reasons for that, right? It could be because they are using multiple programming languages, so they're familiar in one language but not the other, or multiple frameworks. For example, as a Python developer, you may be familiar with Django, but now you're using Flask. And then on top of that, numerous cloud services and APIs, right? And across all of these combinations, then you have to, design your solution. And naturally, you don't memorize all this code, right? So typically, there is a lot of boilerplate code or undifferentiated code. For example, in the world of Lambda, you would see, many functions written like grab the latest file from S3 and send a notification on SNS
Yeah.
that this file is now here. Um, so that code, I mean, sending a notification on SNS or getting the latest file from S3, I don't think anybody would memorize that code, right? Typically, you would go to the documentation and pick it from there. And that takes 10-15 minutes of your time every time. So even after you actually visualize and design the solution, the coding part, which I call maybe the boring part, because you already have the solution outlined, that takes you a lot of time, and that's where CodeWhisperer comes in. So imagine the same example where you want to upload a file to S3 and then send a notification that the file has been successfully uploaded, and that's your Lambda function. Obviously you have to create the triggers and whatnot. That is like a separate process. But in the IDE or in the Lambda console, what you would do is you basically would write a function to upload a file to S3. You would write a function to send a notification to SNS, and the Lambda function would call these two functions, right? So here, what CodeWhisperer can do is basically then take the heavy lifting of actually writing these repetitive functions from the developer and automatically generate the code for you, right? So the way CodeWhisperer works is basically it's a machine learning powered service which takes into account your previous code that you have written in your IDE as well as your plain English comments, and then it will generate the next few lines of code for you, right? So this is powered by a machine learning model that has been trained on billions of lines of code. And just as a human being learns how to code after years of practice, the model has now learned how to code in Python, Java, and JavaScript, right? Those are the three languages we support today. So based on its understanding of English, it also understands English, and its ability to write code. As you provide instructions, it will just convert those instructions into code similar to what a human being would do. Right. So a couple of things to keep in mind here. One is it actually generates entirely new code based on your context and instructions. What that means is, I know the code that you see on the screen doesn't look like entirely new code, but what it means is it's not copy pasting from documentation or some other developer forum. It is actually writing code for you, just like you would write upon given an instruction. So that's one. The benefit here is when it writes code for you, it takes into account the context. So it actually has your objects and variables already included in the code. You don't have to modify the code much, it's ready to go. The second key capability here is it understands English, so it can write command from plain English. On the screen on the right hand side, you see the image where the comment says function to upload a file to S3. So instead of upload a file, if you said store a file in S3 or push a file to S3, it will still understand. Because at its core, it does understand English, right? So we're not trying to create input-output combinations where you have to remember what is the input comment I need to type so that I get this output, right? You can simply express your intent in plain English, and it would understand that, and it will create the code for you.
I think that's amazing. I mean, I understand the sort of first use case of, when you start typing out a Lambda function or a Lambda function, get dash S3 or put dash 3, and it realizes that and then fills out, a line or two of your function. But to just have a comment, and I know that the text is probably maybe a little bit small, but the text comment is to write a function to upload a file to S3. And that's just a comment in your code. And
Yeah.
CodeWhisperer is going to go, oh, you want to upload something to S3. And work out what language you're in, what your input objects are, and generate a whole sort of input code into your IDE or into the console. Sorry, into the console. That's phenomenal. I mean, from your comments, you don't even need to be a particularly good developer like I am, and this will be super useful.
True. Yeah, yeah, and that even for good developers, right? So for now,
Yeah,
our target audience is professional developers, because this is an entirely new technology. We are in
yeah.
preview, right? So you still have to know whether what it is showing you is correct or not, and it will give you multiple options to choose from. So still have to pick the best one for you. But the idea is, just imagine how much time it saves writing you this undifferentiated code, right? You would typically go to the, I think, Boto 3 documentation, look
Yeah.
for the code somewhere, and you would take some time to find it. You'll copy paste it, then you'll change it, right? All of that boring part of your work is now taken away, and you can focus on actually designing the solution where you say, okay, this is how the workflow should look like, and after that, it will generate the code from simple English comments for you. In fact, Julian, if you would be so kind to share the workshop link that
Yeah.
I shared with our audience, it actually, the workshop does the same thing. It, it shows you how you can simply define your workflow in plain English, and then CodeWhisperer, based on those simple English comments, will generate the code for you, right? So you may have to do a little bit of edits here and there, but the workshop will take you through an entire process of building a serverless application, mostly just using English comments, right? So that's where the value proposition comes in. It will save you a lot of time. It will save you all the boring work, and you can focus on actually the solution and the workflow of your, solution.
Oh, that's great. So I've placed the link to the workshops, so that'll be available for you. And workshops are always a great way. It allows you to get hands-on with a tech show. It's going to be fantastic to see myself and Ankur talk about it. But here you can actually get live and set up your own environment and do it with your own code. Just to interject and remind you that we are live on Serverless Office Hours. So if you want to send us any questions about today or some general stuff, specifically machine learning and CodeWhisperer, Ankur's the expert and happy to help you. So yeah, send us your questions and comments. It's one of the benefits of being able to join us live, and thank you for being here.
All right, moving forward. So in a nutshell, this is how CodeWhisperer works, right? So imagine you're the developer on the left-hand side of this diagram. You're writing code in your IDE or in Lambda console. We do have an extension for CodeWhisperer, right, for all the popular IDEs, including Lambda console. And what it does, it basically is looking for good opportunities to automatically show you code, right? For example, if you enter a comment, it understands this is a comment in English, maybe let's just interpret it and give you the entire function. So we are looking for good opportunities, and then the extension basically, when it's a good opportunity, it will send some of your previous code to the CodeWhisperer service, where it is, basically powered by a pre-trained machine learning model that will generate multiple outputs for you to choose from. And these outputs then will automatically pop up in your IDE, right? So you can actually look at multiple options and pick one. One key thing to note here is we are not actually training the CodeWhisperer model with your code. The model is already pre-trained, right? So your code, or I don't mean the entire repository, but the few lines prior to the cursor and maybe after the cursor, that is actually taken into account as a context or as an input to the model, just to generate the outputs, right? So we will not actually leak your IP, or we will not train the model with your code. So you don't have to worry about whether your code would basically then eventually make its way to somebody else's or some other company's CodeWhisperer suggestion.
That's a super interesting point to make. And I suppose the concerns of some people saying, well, we can pollute the model by writing funny kind of code and get the model messed up. You're using more trusted sources than the world of random Lambda functions.
Right, yeah. So we do have a data gathering process that is tried and trusted, right? So we do have a data pipeline that makes sure that the training data we feed to the model is thoroughly weighted, and only then it makes its way to the model training phase. Okay, moving on. So these are the key features of CodeWhisperer today. There are two buckets or two important pillars for us. One is developer productivity, and the other is responsible AI. And both of them are equally important, right? So the first one is about how do we make developers more productive by supporting the most popular languages and the most popular IDEs. And in addition, obviously, first-class support for AWS APIs, because we also do want to make sure that building applications on AWS is super easy going forward, right? So you can just, as long as you have the workflow in mind, you can simply express it in plain English, and it should give you the code to interact with AWS APIs. And we'll see some examples today in a live demo. But the idea here is, you shouldn't have to visit the AWS documentation often and waste your time doing that, right? In terms of languages, we support Python, Java, and JavaScript today, and we are working on C# and TypeScript support. In terms of IDEs, we support JetBrains family and VS Code today, along with our own IDEs in Cloud9 and Lambda console. And shortly, we will also be supporting Visual Studio. Now the second bucket, which is the responsible AI bucket, this is where we want to make sure that you know this all of this new power of AI, it comes with the right tools for you to actually use it with some sense of responsibility. So first one is reference tracker. One of the concerns a lot of our developers have is because we have used open source code in our training data. Sometimes even that open source code have some licensing implications, right? So even though CodeWhisperer generates the code completely from scratch and it writes, let's say, one word at a time, the end result of a code suggestion can actually almost verbatim match some license code, right? And then you would be exposed to some copyright violation. So what reference tracker does, it basically warns the developer, it notifies the developer that look, this code suggestion, it looks very similar to some unique code that this person has written or this repository has. So what you should do is you should carefully look at the original source and then decide whether you want to use it or not based on the license type and based on your comfort level with using certain type of licenses, right? um, and if you decide to use it, then the right thing to do is basically attribute it to the original repository or the author. So that is the reference tracker. We'll see one live demo today which will actually show you visually how it looks. The second one is security scan. Now, once again, because we have used publicly available code to train this model, we know that not all of the publicly available code is production grade, right? There could be some unwanted patterns that the model might have learned, and that might actually then result in some recommendations that may have those patterns. Also, the developer may write something that is not completely secure, or the combination of developer written code and code whisper written code taken together may have security issues, right? So that's why we simply give a button where you can run a security scan on an entire file just before you commit the file, to make sure that at least the most commonly known security issues are caught and you fix those issues before committing your code. And the last one is bias avoidance. Here, we do have a foundational bias awareness technology where we're looking at certain protected classes and sensitive terms. And if those two things come together in a recommendation, we simply filter it out. For example, if we say a function generated which says, decide whether to hire or decide whether to approve for credit, and one of the criteria is either gender or race, right? So if you take hire and gender in combination, it basically typically that code would be somewhat biased towards a particular gender. So what we do is basically in those cases when these two things come together, we will simply filter out that code and we will not show it to the end user. Now, here are the few use cases that you can think of CodeWhisperer as like a right fit for. The first one is developing next gen applications, including serverless applications, right? So with Java, JavaScript, and Python, you can build front end and back end part of your code as well as the serverless applications using CodeWhisperer. It is also pretty efficient at writing code for machine learning. So if you want to, I don't know, include TensorFlow or PyTorch and write code to build a model, it is pretty efficient at doing that. The third use case is obviously building applications using AWS services, where we are making sure that we offer first-class support for AWS APIs and the popular services. And the fourth use case you can think of is automating unit test generation. Once again, writing unit test is I don't think anybody enjoys doing that, but it is a critical part of the workflow. So as soon as you have written a function, maybe you can say write a unit test for the function, and CodeWhisperer will automatically generate that for you. And we'll see that in our demo today. Yeah, just before now jumping into the demo, I do want to call out that one of the primary goals for us to actually make it easy to build applications on AWS, right? I think I have mentioned this and you see a demo as well. But the idea here is as long as you can say it or write it in plain English what you want to do, especially for popular services like S3, DynamoDB, right, and using Lambda, For those use cases, we are taking extra efforts to make sure the code generation is high quality and highly accurate. We are making sure that we are actually writing the code snippets that we believe are great examples and fitting it as training data to the model, so that the model learns the best practices and the best patterns for using AWS APIs and AWS services. What that means is, for AWS related code, you would see the code, being a little more professional. It may have the right comments attached to it. It may have things like error handling and exception handling, which you may not see for generic code completion. For example, uploading a CSV file to Pandas data frame. You may not see all of those good things, but for code related to AWS, we want to make sure that it is as close to production ready code as possible, so that you don't have to make a lot of changes. And this is a customer testimonial from one of our early adopters. We talked about productivity and time saving a lot, but what Ryan emphasizes here is basically, less distractions. So whenever you leave your IDE and go to, let's say, Stack Overflow, right? You're looking for a certain code snippet, and sometimes you find something else, some other question that is also interesting, right? So you eventually, there are distractions where you are looking for something, and then you spend a lot of time looking at something else before you come back to your IDE. And that's what CodeWhisperer avoids, right, or helps you avoid, because you don't have to leave your IDE and you see the completions of the code snippets directly in real time in your IDE automatically. You don't have to actually go to these forums or documentation, right? So all that distraction, all that kind of context switch where you're going from here to there, that can be avoided. And as a result, for an end-to-end task, you actually get it done much faster, right? So the benefit is not only the 10 minutes you save, but also all the other time you actually spend up doing other research or looking at other things when you leave the IDE. And with that, let's jump to the demo. So Julian, do we have any questions? Because sorry, I am not
No, that's
on
fine.
my.
Can you see? There was a comment that I was muted, or was that me or not?
Sorry, I think your voice came from. All right.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? My microphone seems muted.
Yeah, yeah. Now it's okay. I
Okay.
see one comment that you say, develop next gen applications by literally copying code that
Yeah,
already.
Vitlal, thanks for joining us, and thanks for the question. Sorry, my microphone's just decided not to work in the middle of chatting, but anyway, I will try and increase the volume again. Yeah. What I'll say is everything old is new again. So if we can get the best practices for the machine learning, next generation applications with your good trusted production code, I suppose. But yeah, good point.
Yeah, yeah. And we can actually take a look. I mean, next generation applications, typically the code patterns are similar, your design would be different, right? So that's where how you design your workflow would be different, but things like file operations, things like data processing, they would still follow similar patterns. All right, so looking at the screen now, what I have open is PyCharm, which is a JetBrains IDE. I have already installed the AWS Toolkit extension, or as they call in the JetBrains word, plugin, and which has CodeWhisperer, right? So I have already enabled CodeWhisperer. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at a couple of samples here. Basically, one for uh, generic code completion, where we would do some data processing with pandas and try to create a unit test, and then we'll also take a look at an AWS specific example, right? Then we'll also switch gears a little bit and look at the responsible AI part, where we'll run a security scan, or we will look at code that is kind of referenceable with a certain license, and how CodeWhisperer warns you or notifies you that you have to pay attention. So the first thing, we'll start with a simple function to load a CSV file.
Ankur, if you've got a chance, can we just make the text a little bit bigger with the grey and the black? It's
Okay.
not so easy to see. So if we can get some more size or some color, that would be great.
Yeah.
Size is probably more important.
Yeah. So let me actually do that. Let me make it 18.
I think even a little bit bigger if you can, if you don't mind. I think the contrast is
That
it
will
comes a bit
actually,
low across the stream.
yeah, because that will.
Okay, well, you can also talk through it as well. We can, you can say what you're writing, and then just in case people can't see, we got you covered.
Okay. Yeah. Let me see if I can increase it a little bit more.
But basically, you are writing a Lambda function. You haven't written any code over here. You are just in your PyCharm local project, and
Yeah.
you've just written a comment saying function to
Yeah.
load a
So
new
I'm not writing
CSV
a
file.
Lambda function yet. I'm
Yeah,
just doing
okay.
simple pandas data frame processing, and the next one will take a look at how to write a Lambda function, right? Okay. So the first one, function to load a CSV file in pandas data frame. So as you can see, it is also guessing my intent, right? So not only it starts working after I complete my comment, but right now it is also trying to guess because I have imported pandas package. It is telling me that this is what we probably want to do, right? Now I will hit my tab key to accept. And upon hitting enter, now it should generate the function definition for me. Right now it says, okay, you want to write a function. Cool. This is the function header. But let's say I still want to provide more instruction, right? I'm not ready to accept this function definition yet. So instead of hitting my tab key to accept, I will simply continue writing. So I'm just going to say select columns name, press, and reach. Now it has once again generated the function definition, which looks okay to me. I'm going to accept it with the tab key. And when I hit enter now, after the function definition, now it generates the rest of the code for me, right? So it says there are 4 suggestions to choose from. I'm pretty sure they're going to be very similar to each other, right? So the second one actually has comments for all the steps. I like that. I will accept it, right? For the first step. So now the entire function is ready for you, right? If you had to write it yourself, it might have taken you some, few minutes. Now it is done in 2 seconds. Now let's say the function is ready. I want to write a unit test for the function I've just written. Right, so unit test for, and it also guesses that you're probably writing unit test for the function you just written, and this is the only function available in the same file. So it is guessing load data is the one that you want to write unit test for. It has generated the function definition again, and as you can see, it is using test underscore as its prefix, right? So it is also guessing the right nomenclature. Now it should generate the entire function, which is the unit test, right? So here you can see there is an expected output. This is one of the 5 recommendations to choose from. So you create an expected output in the data frame, and then you load data, and then you assert, okay, so this looks decent. The next one is also very similar. Third one, fourth one. Yeah, all of them are actually pretty similar, right? So I think the second one, you can just go with that, right? So now here you can see that it has given you the structure, right? So or this function is not actually available. So let me actually go back and see whether I can generate another one.
Thanks, EDJ Geek, for joining us. Yep, that is stinking cool. That is amazing. I didn't realize that it could just do the test kind of things. Never mind being able to generate code from a function. Oh, I need to test this.
Yeah.
Expected, actual, and assert. Bring it on.
Yeah, and as you can see, your names could be different, right? So based on what you have in your test underscore load data.csv file, or you could actually even the name of your CSV file could be different. But you could make those small tweaks, and then your code is ready to go, right? So instead of John, your that name could be Peter, the address could be a little bit different, but it is actually guessing what should be tested, right, based on the function
And
that
it's even the silly things I know when I'm writing code, like that sort of expected PD dot of data frame, your brackets, your curly brackets, your colons, all those kind of things. You land up just messing something up, and that's another 5 minutes of hassling trying to bracket match
yeah.
and do all that kind of thing. So yeah, never mind all the clever code. Yeah, if you're going to get the code punctuation for me, that's going to be awesome.
Yeah, yeah, and the structure too, right? You may have to make
Yeah.
small changes, but the structure is there. Okay, so this is first example where this is generic code completion. Now let's take a look at something that is more related to AWS, and maybe even think of let's try to create a Lambda function, right? So we'll what we'll do is maybe let's create a workflow where we want to transcribe a latest file from your S3 bucket, and then upload the results of the transcription to a DynamoDB table, right? So here, what you would need is basically a function to upload uh, or load an item to DynamoDB. You need a function to transcribe, and then basically the Lambda function to bring it all together, right? So let's say we will start with function to upload an item to a DynamoDB. It's already guessing my intent for some reason. But yeah, upload an item to a DynamoDB table, right? That's what I want to do. Tab, enter, uh, table name, item, dict, ID, bucket. Yeah, the first one, good. Now it should actually generate, construct the item, response, table name, item, I don't know. Okay, there you go. Uh, what is the second one? Put item, DynamoDB. Okay, this is now actually setting up the DynamoDB client. And then, okay, the third one looks good. It actually also has setting up the client. It also has the client cat scenario. All right. And let's see if there is anything else here. Item added to table. Okay. Now let's write the function to transcribe a file from an S3 bucket. So transcribe bucket name, object name, transcription name, identity language, and okay, so that's the first one. All right. To generate the code for, you see that it's working. All right. So transcribe file info is taking the S3 object, setting up. Okay. Start transcription. Yeah, this looks good, right? So now it is basically taking an file info from the S3 bucket. It is passing that info to the transcription job, and it is, the transcribe client is now starting the transcription job. Now let's bring it all together. Where, okay, so there was, I think, one line here with an error. And then I'm going to write lambda function. Let us from S3 bucket transcribe it and put the, okay, it is once again, it is getting my intent. It is saying that based on the functions you have written, what you want to do is you want to get the latest file from the S3 bucket, transcribe it, and put the result in a DynamoDB table, right? I hope you can see this if it's too small. Now it is generating the function, and let me hit enter. Now it should actually generate the entire Lambda function, right? And once again, it may not be 100% correct, but it will get you 90% there so that you can make small changes, small tweaks. All right. Yeah, so it is taking, obviously you have to set up the events or the CloudWatch events where you're looking at, as soon as there is a file added to an S3 bucket, it fires the event. But that's where it will get its information from, and then it starts the transcription job for you. It calls, the transcribe function, and it will try to upload it to as the output to put item.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, this is amazing scaffolding it's already going to do. And you may, obviously, if you're doing things in Lambda, for example, you want to maybe want to set up the DynamoDB connection within the outside of the function handler in the init code. But that's just a copy across.
Yeah.
And maybe you're going to use environment variables for your SNS topic or that kind of thing, which you're going to chop around. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this is, as Eric says, yeah, this is way more than I was expecting. The predictive nature of this is incredible. Yeah, Eric, I'm on the money with that. That is, yeah, this is very impressive.
Yeah, and then you can see it is actually guessing as you're writing the comment itself. It is guessing based on what you have done so far. It is also guessing the workflow for you, right? So it will actually get the latest file, and then set up the transcription job info. It is calling the transcribe function, then it is calling the put item function. So all of the structure is there. You may have to make some tweaks here and there, but here it is basically creating a transcription job for you and putting the results in the DynamoDB table. Of course, you may want to actually the item itself, right? You may want to add more information to it, less information to it. That's on you. But the workflow is there, right? So as you can see, we simply all we did in this example is we simply said in plain English, I want to upload an item to DynamoDB. I want to transcribe a file from an S3 bucket, and then I want to write a Lambda function that will take the latest file, transcribe it, and upload the results to DynamoDB, right? All those three instructions will give you the entire Lambda function and the workflow. So once again, Julian, do we have any questions? Let me, okay.
Well, no, we've got, yeah, good comments. There was, when we were talking about the file, Eric was asking, there was a file name that I mentioned in the auto generation. Does it change if the data file already exists? And that was when it was populating, I think, the test data. If you did have a file that exists, would it, look inside that file data, or is that's peeling back the curtain too much?
No, I think unfortunately it doesn't. It is limited to your IDE, right? So outside
That
of
makes
your
sense, yeah.
IDE, yeah. So the actual relative part of your CSV file, the existence of the CSV file, it doesn't know much about it, right? So that's why I said you may have to tweak this a little bit if your file path is different, if your file name is different, you may have to change it a little bit. Um, but other than that, it is giving you the structure to make sure that you spend probably a minute and you're done.
Yeah, no. Eric, is this PyCharm only? No, it is VS Code, and I think Visual Studio was coming, or is that already? So yeah, it's a bunch of IDs.
Yeah, so JetBrains is PyCharm, IntelliJ IDEA, WebStorm, those ones, and then VS Code. And then we already have support for Cloud9 and Lambda Console.
Okay, great. And then, yeah, Gerald van Vuren says, will it suggest when creating SAM CloudFormation templates? Gerald, I'm not quite sure if you're asking about the Lambda code, because this is what this is going to generate. So if you are generating Lambda code in an IDE in the Lambda console or your or Cloud9, this is going to work for that. I don't see this generating SAM CloudFormation specific code, or am I? Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, so we do have, in fact, I mean, this has been a constant customer requirement, and we do have CDK support on our roadmap. Right?
Okay.
I don't want to comment on the timeline. It's really it's something like Q1 or Q2 next year. But just like we support SDK and putting item in a DynamoDB table, we do also want to support CDK, where you would just in plain English say, I want to create a cluster in EC2 with this formation, and it will create the CDK code for you. And the CDK then takes care of, then converting it to the cloud formation. Yeah.
Excellent. Gerald, if I've messed up your question and you've got something else, then yeah, please let me know. And I suppose, yeah, Vitlol, this comment, can it, for example, recommend CloudFormation resource YAML stuff? When you make a comment like a resource S3 bucket with encryption enabled, that could generate that. I suppose that's what Ankur is hinting at, that maybe next year with some CDK support to be able to create those resources.
Right. Any other questions?
No, I think we're good for now. Yeah.
Okay.
So far, people are liking it, so they're loving to see it in action.
Yeah. So let's switch the gears a little bit. I know we still have some time. Yeah. So let's see how we can actually. Let me just delete the whole thing. I want to generate some code that has licensing implications, and I want to show how it wants you that look. Even though this code is generated from scratch for you, it may look similar to a licensed code, and you should do something about it. So here I'm going to manually trigger CodeWhisperer by hitting Option C. Okay, so what it is doing is now it is, and as you can see, if you can, I know this is like a little tiny text, but for this code recommendation, it is warning me that the reference code is under MIT license. Right.
Okay,
so it is
so
telling
if you can't see, that little box has popped up at the bottom where it has just under the insert code and says reference code under MIT, and you can view the log. So it has correctly spotted the license implication.
Right. So if I accept this by hitting Tab key, it also actually, when I hover on the code, it will warn me that this reference code is under MIT license. Right. It gives me the repository name. And if I want more information, I can always, just look at the code reference panel where it tells me with the timestamp when I accepted certain recommendations that may require license attribution, right? And so all of such acceptances will be recorded, and the user can actually go back and look at, okay, I accepted this recommendation. This is under the MIT license, and we're also working on actually linking the repository itself, so you can go to the repository, look at how it is being used, and then decide whether you're comfortable using license code from MIT license, or not, right? So, okay, I think there is a comment that says maybe it's a good idea to add a link to an article that explains why taking notice of licenses is important. That is fair. Maybe we can actually have pinned template here in the reference log that says why is licensing important, something like that, and we link it. But I think in general, people do understand that, ideally you should not use somebody else's license code, right? That can have copyright implications. So the idea here is, even though these are, by the way, MIT is like an open source friendly license, right? So most of the code that we have used for training data actually is open source. But some of the licenses are more friendlier than the others, right? So you have to then look at the license type and decide. One key thing to keep in mind is, though, if you're not comfortable with the whole thing where you say, okay, I don't know what this license means, right? I just want it to filter out every time there is a possibility that this could be licensed. You could go to the settings, and in the settings, there are a couple of things. One is, you could turn off the include suggestions with code references box, which would basically just filter out all the code when there are licensing implications. The second one is about sharing CodeWhisperer content with AWS. Now, I mentioned that we do not take your code and use it for training the model, but sometimes we store the input-output combination so that our science team can learn from it, right? We can take a look at, okay, which ones are being rejected the most, which ones are being accepted the most, is there a common pattern, how do we improve the model, and stuff like that, right? But you could turn this checkbox off and say that, look, even that information I'm not comfortable sharing with AWS because my code is proprietary, private, it's confidential. So that would mean that we will never share even the input-output combinations when it comes to your usage of CodeWhisperer.
Now, so I suppose obviously that is still going to the CodeWhisperer service. So you are sending the code to an AWS service to do the CodeWhisperer, but this is sharing it for research purposes.
Right. Yeah. So you're sending it, but we are not retaining it. I think that's that. Yeah. You will use it. We will give you the outputs, and everything will be just whatever. Okay, with that, Julian, back to you. If there are more questions, if there are any.
No specific questions so far. Just thinking, in terms of the Lambda console, I know there was a preview release that this is integrated with the Lambda console. I seem to remember that people needed to sign up for that.
Yeah,
Is that still going on? How
that
do
is still, yeah,
people do
yeah.
that?
I will let me share the sign up link with you.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I also do have some other links which I will put in the chat, just related to some various things about CodeWhisperer and some other blog posts I found. So that's the actual CodeWhisperer landing page, and then this blog post is all about introducing CodeWhisperer in the Lambda console. So that also does have information on how it works and
yeah,
some of the signups. But
I
we'll
think
also
that
add
blog
this.
post is probably the best place to start, where it
Okay.
takes you step by step into how to set it up in Lambda console. Uh,
Okay,
and
so that's
that,
the main CodeWhisperer landing page, and this should appear in the chat on the side of your screen, even if you're watching the video after the fact. Sorry for the long URL, but you'd be able to quickly do a pause now if you want to search for that, if you want to connect to it. But in the show notes, that'll be there, and it'll also I'll also put a link up on the page when you are watching this after the fact. And yeah, we have already put the link for the workshop, but I will add that as well. Always love workshops. Even before joining AWS, any opportunity I had to learn about AWS was to do a workshop. So that's always great. So I have actually put just I know you were using PyCharm today, but also the CodeWhisperer for VS Code. I've added the user guide for that, just because I know VS Code is obviously super well used. So that's the URL for CodeWhisperer for VS Code. So get that from the show notes, or you can just pause and use that. And then this is the workshop, and that's even going to be a worse. We should get a short link going for that. I think we're going to be updating our serverlessland.com page with all the workshops, and we'll certainly look to add this one. But yeah, link will be in the show notes as well, so you'll be able to click directly off it. So yeah, so Ankur, sorry, you were talking about how to sign up, and I think within the main blog post, the introducing CodeWhisperer in the Lambda console, that's all there.
yeah.
So is that still a preview at the moment? It's a sign up process, and then what does the CodeWhisperer then just appear in your Lambda console as it
Okay.
has in your IDE?
Yes, yes. Once we allow list, you would be able to enable Photoshop in the Lambda console and just start seeing the recommendations.
Okay, and in the preview phase, are you looking for any feedback, or what is the difference, I suppose, between the preview phase and the GA phase? Are there going to be any changes, or not so much?
Yeah, so mostly we are looking at feedback where people are telling us how to improve the product, where they're not seeing certain recommendations, they're not seeing or they're seeing a lot of latency, and they're telling us you have to be faster, you have to be
Okay.
or certain use cases you have to be more accurate. So we're taking that information and we're improving the product before we go GA. The other part is during preview, it is absolutely free to use, right? At GA, we will most likely have a free tier, but that would have upper limit of how many recommendations you can see per month in the free tier. But in preview, it's you can use it to your heart's content.
Okay. One of the other things I spotted and was thinking about was the security scanning aspect of it. Is that the security scanning on the
So yeah,
code
that's
you write, or from the model?
it is a separate workflow. I can actually quickly show that part also. So let's say if we add some code that is not secure, right? We just for the sake of demo, I'm going to say variables
By the way,
for.
I do hear the pings every now coming from your laptop. It makes me think that whenever CodeWhisperer does a successful match, there's the machine that goes ping, which goes, yes, this is working well. So I love it.
Yeah, it's probably my Slack
uh,
and Chime filing
that's
up
all good.
variables for AWS credentials, right? And let's see if it generates. It should generate an access key. As you can see, it is already masked, right? It's not
Okay,
exposing
yeah.
anybody's access key. It is giving all XXX, but there is some value attached to it. The expectation is if you see something like this, obviously you have to replace it with your own access keys and secret keys. But even then, this is not the safe practice, right? Typically, you would have it as your environment variables, or it would be somewhere else in the configuration file where you would not put it in your code and put it on the GitHub repository. So let's run a security scan now. So the expectation here is it will find all of these commonly known issues like these, and it will warn you that before committing your code, you should fix these. Now it doesn't replace your code review process, your security review process, right? But it gives you a little tool that can actually help you avoid some of those red flags or issues being reported in later part of your review process versus even before committing the code.
Yeah, so this is defense in depth. It's just another helping hand, which is gonna help you,
Yeah.
and also because it's in your ID, it's not having to go through a CI/CD process and then come back to you after a few minutes of building. This is telling you straight away.
Yeah, it's funny. It actually it has AWS best practices in it too. The first thing it said is, look, this is a hard-coded credentials problem. So if I double click on it, it will take the cursor there and it will tell me that it has a hard-coded credential problem. The other one it has figured out is AWS client is not reused. So in Lambda console, you have recreated the AWS client, which is a expensive way of writing code.
Well, that's exactly what I was saying before about setting up the DynamoDB client.
Yeah.
Rather take it out of the function invocation, the function handler, and put it in the initialization. That is incredible that that CodeWhisperer spotted that, and that's just a best a recommendation.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So once again, keep in mind the code I write is for demo purposes. I'm not
Of
a
course.
professional developer myself. So it would have things like that where it's not like production ready professional code. But the good thing is that it was flagged as something that I should not be doing. Right. That's
And obviously, those best practices, as the model gets even cleverer over time, there are going to be more best practices added. So, this is one of those awesome serverless services that's just always going to get better.
true. Yeah. As people will use it more, we'll get more feedback. We'll also behind the scenes, we have the telemetry where we know how many recommendations are being shown or rejected. But this is not actually the recommendation themselves, just the metric where you say, okay, we are showing 500,000 recommendations per week, and 200,000 recommendations are being accepted, right? So that kind of telemetry gives us like a north star to focus on and say, okay, we want the acceptance rate to be 50%. We want to make sure that when we show recommendation, we are highly confident and people find it useful.
And Eric does have to say, and I would agree with this as well, not agree with Eric, but agree for my code. This might even make my code less of a liability. So yeah, any help we can get if the machines are learning and are helping with my code, love it. Well, Ankur, is there anything else you'd like to add, or any sort of other calls to actions? We've got the workshop, we've got a whole bunch of links. Anything else at the top of your head people should be thinking about?
No, I mean, this is available in preview. If you're using Lambda console or you're writing Lambda functions in your IDEs, maybe give this a try. We would love to hear your feedback. Please sign up for the preview. It is absolutely free for use during the preview, so you don't have to worry about any expenses or charges. And we would love to hear your feedback, especially when it comes to building serverless applications and using Lambda functions.
Okay, excellent. And Ankur, what's the best way to give the feedback? Can you do it via the CodeWhisperer console, or is there a part of it to give feedback via there, or which is?
So when you sign up, you will actually receive an email. So there is an email address, CodeWhisperer@amazon.com, where people send us feedback via email, and we do have an ops team looking at that mailbox. So. Okay.
Excellent. Well, just before we finish saying goodbye to Ankur, Serverless Office Hours next week is going to be coming up, and this, I have to say, seems decidedly old school, but super useful. The Serverless Snippets collection, which my colleague Dave is going to be talking to James Bezic about, is on serverlessland.com, and this is all about, I do have a slide, let me go to the right one, click, there we go, the Serverless Snippets collection, s12d.com/snippets, and this is CloudWatch logs, insights, and integrations, and some tools for a whole bunch of different services, and this is a really quick way that you can just copy and paste and use that. So obviously it hasn't got the intelligence of CodeWhisperer, but it's a different way of doing kind of things. Maybe we'll link these together one day. That seems like a sort of cool use cases. So yeah, certainly look at the Serverless Snippets collection. That's new and can help you discover some little important nuggets of code that you can use in your application. applications. Of course, the serverless workflows collection is already on serverlessland.com. S12d.com/workflows is the short link. And this is all about building step functions workflows. So there's some fundamentals, some patterns, and some full-blown applications for a bunch of use cases, from data processing to team collaboration. So have a look at those. They're really easy to one-click deploy into your account, and you can explore step functions, which is an incredible service. And the original OG serverless patterns collection, this is infrastructure as code, really the best repository of infrastructure as code, connecting one or two services, supports CDK, SAM, the serverless framework, and Terraform across a whole bunch of different languages and a whole bunch of different services. So really, before you're building any serverless applications, you should be using infrastructure as code, and the serverless patterns collection is going to help. So Ankur, we really appreciate you spending the time today. Ankur has mentioned how to give feedback via the beta. You can also send feedback to me, Julian_Wood on Twitter, or various other means. Hey, we're happy to hear about you, and if you have suggestions for other shows or other things you'd like for us to feature on Serverless Office Hours, of course, we'd always love to hear from you. Well, Ankur, and I had mentioned, yes, serverlessland.com, the one-stop landing page for all things to do with serverless on AWS. So Ankur, I really want to thank you so much and appreciate you taking the time to show us what I think is an incredible service. This is, I can see, and this is only the beginning, which is crazy to think how it's only early days and it's only going to get better. So thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
Cheers. And yeah, back, we'll see you same time, same place.